Swami Ramakrishnananda was not a philanthropist, yet his whole life was consecrated to the service of humanity. He did not carry food to the hungry or clothe the naked, yet he gave to men with bountiful hand. His delight was in service, and whatever he did glowed with the warmth of his own fervent spirit. I remember still the light that shone in his face as he moved about supervising the preparations for a festival that day at the monastery, during which thousands of poor people were fed. Yet there was nothing in his manner which indicated that he thought he was doing good. His attitude towards such forms of practical service was not the usual one. Work for others is self-amelioration, was the way he defined it to me one day. Helping others was an opportunity for the giver and laid no weight of obligation on the one who was helped. We need to serve others, he claimed, in order to lift ourselves up out of the state of degradation and selfishness into which we have fallen. We should be grateful to the needy for making it possible for us to raise ourselves. That is the only real good that comes out of all that we do for others. We merely better ourselves. To seek commendation for a kindly act invariably drew forth a caustic response from the Swami. He showed little mercy to anyone who was vain of his good deeds. The merit of service in his measure of values lay not in giving, but in giving freely, without a sense of giving. Swami Vivekananda was right, he said, when he said, "Let the receiver stand up and permit. Let the giver kneel down and give thanks that he has been given a chance to unfold himself." This is no exaggeration. It is literally true. For what happens when you do good to another? You expand your own heart and grow more unselfish. But suppose there were no needy or unfortunate souls, what would happen? You would become a selfish brute. And he added, if you do anything to make a man happy, no matter what it is, be glad of it. You have done well. But never try to bring misery to any living being. This is the only sin. One sultry evening, a number of friends had come directly from their offices to the monastery, as was their frequent custom, and had gathered around the Swami near the north door of the monastery hall. As he talked to them, his face was alight with a radiant smile, and his body rocked back and forth in rhythm with the rise and fall of his voice. One of the gentlemen asked, "Is it possible really to work for man until you have realized God?" The Swami replied, "Work? What do you mean by work for others? You can do nothing unless you have the commandment of God. Without that, if you try to work for others, you are sure to be lost in the meandering paths of the world." Then, after a moment's pause, he continued, "If you would help others, you must look on the bright side of everyone. Every man has his weaknesses, but you must overlook them and see only his good qualities. You must give up all fault-finding, or if you find fault, let it be with yourself." Swami Ramakrishnananda was at his best in this informal mode of teaching. He never counted his audience. Whether he was speaking to 2 or 200 or 2,000, the same ardor gave force and warmth to his words. He did not measure out his inspiration according to the number of his listeners. It came from within, and came abundantly, however few were present. Once he had talked long and impressively on a lofty subject, I exclaimed. "Swami, you talk to me as if I were an audience of 1,000. You are," he replied quietly. But whether he spoke from the platform or in a conversation, his message was always peculiarly his own. He admitted to me one day that his master had entrusted to him a certain special message to convey to the world, which he did not give even to Swami Vivekananda. Swamiji was given a big, all-round message, but a little message was kept for me, he said. That he transmitted it faithfully and forcefully, none can doubt. He sought no glory for himself in doing it. He rarely referred to his own experience in his lectures and classes. His master was the paramount authority cited at all times. The Swami was not an eloquent speaker, not even a fluent one, but what he said carried. It had the weight of realization behind it. He never resorted to oratorical subterfuge to stir his listeners or hold their attention. His sole concern was by simple, unobtrusive means to create a new and higher point of contact for their thought. He sought less to help than to awaken, that those who heard might help themselves. His was a voice from the heights. He never defined his method or intention to me, but he held, I believe, that as he had chosen the highest vocation, what he gave the world must be on the same lofty level. His appeal was always to man's soul nature. You are pure. You are perfect. You are divine by your nature, were reiterated words on his lips. A man may mistake a rope for a snake, but any amount of imagination will not turn the rope into a snake. So you may think you have committed many sins or been guilty of wrongdoing, but nothing can change your pure, divine nature. That remains always the same, and you are always that. Without the help of God, no one can realize his eternal nature, however indestructible it may be. Sri Krishna says plainly in the Gita, "This Maya with which I cover myself, no one can pierce through. They only can penetrate it who take refuge at my feet." And again, if you would gain wisdom or the knowledge of your infinite nature, you must go to one who has realized his infinite nature and serve him. Then bring forth your doubts and you will be illumined. That means you must be humble. Knowledge of the Atman or higher self comes only through humility. To the man who was absorbed in his material problems, the Swami may have seemed too transcendental. But in reality, he was preeminently practical. For the one sure remedy for anxiety, he exclaimed, was vision. When worries and perplexities arise in your mind, he said, it shows we have ceased to believe in God, and in that he is caring for us. If we have real faith in God, we can never grow anxious. He knew too well that solving a problem did not bring release, that out of that solution would spring a new problem. The only way of escape lay in cutting the endless chain of perplexities by rousing in man that which was superior to all our material conditions. Why should you throw away your perfect nature and take an imperfect nature, he said. Why do you give up your infinite life for this perishable life of a few years? You have degraded yourself. The omnipotent, omniscient, immortal, eternal being is imagining that he dies, that he is limited, ignorant, and weak, and helpless. You are pure. You are spotless. Do not give way to false imagination. This false meaning will make you what you are imagining yourself to be. You are like a man who hears the false news that his entire fortune has been lost and begins to lament and ask, "What shall I do? How shall I live?" Well, all the time, his lands and money are there as before. So you are imagining that you are miserable and helpless, but you have not lost your infinite glory. You are absolutely perfect, all blissful, immortal. This outer body of yours is only an instrument and cannot limit you, except as you give it power. You have actually need of nothing. You are already complete, but you have forgotten it. You have thrown away the real jewel and are making much of the pebble in the street. Do not be content with the little things of this world. This universe is a baby's toy. Throw it away. Claim your infinite heritage. This little span of life is not yours. Your life has no beginning and no end. Okay, now we'll go on. If there are questions or comments, I don't know who's here with Zoom because we're having a little technical difficulty, but you're welcome to ask a question. Otherwise, we'll go on to reminiscence number 6. Okay. The Spanish Carmelite monk and mystic, St. John of the Cross, declares in his spiritual maxims, "Faith is the greatest shelter of the soul." It was in this safe shelter that Swami Ramakrishnananda sought refuge. If storms of doubts ever overtook him, he weathered them in silence and alone. He never made them known to others. His faith seemed impregnable, whatever the stress of circumstance. As a youth, when he was frequenting the Brahmo Samaj, he had been assailed by vague questionings, but the touch of Sri Ramakrishna's thought had dispelled them, almost without words. Tests he had, and severe ones. There were moments in his public life when it seemed as if the Master had abandoned him, leaving him to the mercy of an indifferent multitude, but he did not waver. One occasion I recall, which tried his trust so bitterly that he buried his face in his hands, and as he cried aloud for release, great heroic tears trickled through his fingers, yet he never doubted the one on whom he called. Faith was to Swami Ramakrishnananda the basic support of all spiritual living. Without it, he believed, there could be no true devotion, no higher vision, no life even. Faith in God is the foundations of all life, both spiritual and physical, he said one day. If you should put faith in God on one side and the Lord of the universe on the other, I would take faith in God. Blessed is the man who has this faith. He is the happiest of men because he is free from all anxiety. We are all only puppets in the hands of God. When we understand this, all pride and ambition, all vanity and egotism will go. For that reason is the man blessed who has faith, because he has realized his puppet nature. One evening there were several visitors at the Mylapore Mat. One of them asked, "How can we get such faith as Prahlada had?" The Swami replied, "The more you can purify yourself, the more that faith will come. Although Prahlada was put into boiling oil, although he was thrown under the feet of a mad elephant and over the highest precipice, he was not hurt because of his faith. But it was not blind faith that he had. It was a faith based on realization. And if you have the same faith, you will be more powerful than the whole universe. Nothing can put you down. Our faith is too faltering. Few of us believe in God all the time. As long as we have 3 or 4 rupees in our pocket, we think we can depend upon ourselves. Only when the last anna is gone, and we do not know where to get another, do we begin to trust in God. But the man who depends upon himself is never safe, while the man who has perfect faith in God is never in danger. A kindling devotion was the natural outgrowth of a faith such as Swami Ramakrishnananda possessed. His name, which was that of his master, bore witness to it. By his own fervor was he baptized, a baptism of fire. It burned through and through him. One felt the glow of it even at his approach. Detached he might be, but never lukewarm. He gave no quarter to indolent indifference. Man must love God for his whole soul, with his whole soul and mind and heart, if he would love him at all. To give his own words, if you would find that supreme reality which lies behind all these hollow unrealities, you must be wholly devoted to it. You must worship the living God with your whole heart and give up the worship of things that die. You must feel the utter hollowness of everything but truth, as Nachiketa did. Wealth, kingdoms, enjoyments, power were nothing to him, less than zero. He wanted nothing but truth, and truth was bound to come to him. You must have that same firm conviction about the hollowness of the material world and seek God with undivided devotion. Then he will surely come to you. The Swami accepted no compromise and asked none of God. There could be no bartering for the treasures of spiritual vision and union with the divine. One avenue alone lay open to their attainment. There is but one yoga, and that is devotion, he said to me one day. The karmi may say that he attains the supreme by non-attachment, or by vairagyam, the jnani that he gets it by the path of discrimination, and the Raja Yogi by the path of concentration. But if the karmi has no devotion in his practice of non-attachment, or the jnani in his discrimination, or the Raja Yogi in his concentration, he will not realize his ideal. Devotion is the only means to it. Someone asked, what kind of devotion takes us to God? The Swami replied, the child's devotion to its mother. But is that a rational way to reach him? How long do you reason? So long as you have not arrived at a conclusion, was the Swami's quick answer. Why does the baby go to the mother? Because it has reasoned out that she is the best friend it has. And why do you go to God? Because you have reasoned out that He and no one else can help you. So, as the baby goes to its mother, you turn to God. Another person present put this question: what is meant in the Gita by steadfastness in devotion? Steadfastness in devotion, the Swami said, means that you may be busy with many things, but still your mind is always turned toward God. You may not feel the same ardor always, but so long as the hunger for devotion to God is there, you are steady in devotion. Swami Ramakrishnananda's ardor of devotion appeared unvarying, and it carried him with irresistible force to complete surrender. He yielded himself utterly to the ideal, and never was there a more willing captive. Surrender meant to him the culminating triumph of all spiritual effort. Sri Krishna and the other great teachers have taught many different ways of going to God, he declared. But in the end, they threw all aside and said simply, have complete self-surrender. Without absolute self-abnegation, no one can realize God. You must know that, of yourself, you can do nothing. Until you recognize this, realization of God will not come. If a man is able to see things as they should be seen, and to analyze himself properly, he will understand that he is wholly in the hands of a higher power. Then he says, when man's vanity is puffed up by name, fame, importance, wealth, he has no hope to reach thee, O Lord. Thou comest to those who have none else to call their own. Thou belongest to the poor, the lowly, to those who have nothing in this world. Come to me, O Lord. All I have is thine. It never was mine. Thou art my wealth. Surrender was a favorite theme with the Swami. He recurred to it constantly, and whenever he talked on it, his words burned deep into the heart. Spiritual fruition would come, he believed, only to him who had the desire and the power to yield himself up wholly captive. All must be given if all was to be received. Man is too often afraid to surrender, he said to me one evening. He thinks he will lose something, but he is never a loser when he gives himself absolutely to the Lord. Only when he is guided by God does he cease to blunder, because then God works through his hands, sees through his eyes, speaks with his tongue, and he becomes a perfect instrument in the hands of God. He is directed by God in everything. Pray to God constantly. O Lord, grant that I may know my own nothingness, and that thou art all in all. Help me to realize that I am a mere instrument in thy hands, and that all is done by thee. When a man comes to understand this, he is truly happy because he feels secure. He knows all his actions are guided by God, who will never misdirect him. The man who acts on his own responsibility is sure to make mistakes. But the man who surrenders everything to God always acts wisely. And that's the end of that reminiscence. I think we'll stop there. Are there any questions or comments or just anything more that you want to go over? Okay. I'm sorry? That's because he was too. He never once spelled it out. It was self-surrender and devotion to God. But he never did. I was reading that very carefully, and he never really. Is it self-surrender? Is it surrender? Yeah. But he never spelled it out exactly. Well, it's. It's basically okay, this is as close as that's good. The closest that he got when he said that Swamiji had the big all-round message, but a little message he kept for me. And then he goes on to, he seldom referred to himself in his classes, and his master was perfect. You are divine by your nature. You can always mistake a rope for a snake, but you can never change the rope into a snake. So as long as you identify with the snake, you're not identifying with your real self. And I think that's what it was. To stop identifying with this world and this ephemeral nonsense that we think is so real. Okay, this Saturday, we will have a gospel reading at 5 o'clock in the temple. It says 5:30 here on the... It's at 5 o'clock. It will also be Karma Yoga Day, so if any of you can make it to the convent, please come anytime from 9 to noon, and we'll have jobs for people to do. Come help us work around the property, inside, outside. We'll have both. And then stay for lunch with us. The topic of the talk on Sunday is Merrily, Merrily, Life is But a Dream. Kind of goes with what we just read this evening, that we have identified with all this that we think is real, that we pretend is real. But this old nursery rhyme had it right. Merrily, merrily, life is but a dream. So that will be at 11 o'clock here in the temple. Any questions or comments now? Davey, are there any on Zoom?
All the usual suspects.
Okay, I can't see anyone, John, because no comments, though. Okay. Then we will hopefully see you Saturday, and if we don't see you in person, hopefully we'll have our tablet working. We could see you in virtually, which is just about as real. Okay. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Panamastu. We'll see you when we see you in person.